Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome in to Tider Insider TV, brought to you, as mentioned, by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Boy, Don Staley and his crew do an incredible job helping out Tuscaloosa Tourism and West Alabama Tourism. And you see our great tumblers that we enjoy, our favorite beverage out of during the show, sitting right here on the set. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. Well, Rod, it's officially Iron Bowl week, and we are going to break it down in depth as the Tide gets ready to go to Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn coming up in just a little bit. But first, how the West was won. Alabama clinched the SEC West Division title this past Saturday with a hard-fought 42-35 win over the Arkansas Razorbacks, which sets up that showdown with the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC championship game a week from this coming Saturday. But the question on fans' minds, does what you saw this past Saturday give you confidence in a game against the top-ranked Bulldogs and even Auburn this week? Rodney, many fans will argue that Alabama won the game but was not impressive, although there's no doubt that Bryce Young was impressive. He lit it up, my friend, 31 of 40 for 559. That's a single-game record, breaking the 44 that Scott Hunter threw for against Auburn in 1969. 5 touchdowns, no picks. Brian Robinson, 27 of 122, 4.5-yard average. Jamison Williams, a big game. Mechie, a big game. Offensively on Saturday, other than shooting themselves in the foot some, there was no problem moving the football up and down the field.
Yeah, very impressive display, obviously, Gary. I mean, they ran the ball at times. They ran it well. Brian Robinson going over 120. You mentioned, obviously, Jamison Williams there having another big game, going for 190 on 8 catches. John Mechie having 170-plus on 10 grabs. So, again, they spread the ball around, very effective, offensively. It's just kind of those things, once again, Gary, the inconsistencies that we had talked about last week and through several weeks on both sides of the ball, really, but more so maybe defensively in this game.
Yeah, defensively. They made a lot of good plays, made some great plays. At times looked dominant. The problem is mistakes, giving up big plays, allowing 3rd and 16s to be converted on a quarterback run, at least at 4th and 1, and then they got it the next play. They just have not been able defensively this year, it seems like, Rodney, to put it all together.
No, they haven't. They've given up plays, crucial times. You had Arkansas backed up at the goal line. They hit a big throw down the right sideline when Josh Jobe was in really good position to make the play. Too, Gary, there was a big play early in the second half. After Alabama goes down, they score a touchdown. Seemingly, you're talking about taking that opening drive down, scoring. That's a big momentum thing for a team like Alabama. And then all of a sudden, you get the push-off on Josh Jobe. It's not called on the same play. There's a delay of game. That's a big play. Arkansas gets a touchdown with Treylon Burks. So, again, it was back and forth.
Close to 700 yards total offense. Alabama, without the mistakes, but that's part of football, might have won that game by 21, 24 points. But as we said, Bryce Young, a record-setting day. Hard to believe with the quarterbacks that have come through here lately that 484-yard single-game passing record held up for 52 years. But it was broken on Saturday. Bryce Young was phenomenal. Here's what he had to say about winning the West and getting that victory.
It's going to go down and it's going to be written as it's something I did. But in reality, that's a reflection of the whole team. That's my O-line protecting for me. That's the receivers, making my job easy and getting open. Running backs helping in both, in the pass and run game, and OB calling great plays. So it's really a team accomplishment.
So, Rod, for the 7th time in the last 10 years, Alabama wins the SEC West. When you think about how strong this division is, from top to bottom, all 7 teams, that is phenomenal that Alabama has won 70% of the SEC West Division titles over the last 10 years.
Yeah, what an accomplishment, Gary. And again, I think, too, as you kind of listen in postgame, the fan reaction to this, look, you won the West. I get it. Maybe this team has had some inconsistencies, but everything Alabama, all their goals are still in front of them. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people need to remember that, Gary. You talk about appreciating winning. Mm-hmm. I think that's really something that people need to consider.
Bryce Young on the offensive side of the ball is a Heisman Trophy candidate. Will Anderson Jr. on the defensive side of the ball, maybe he should be. He has been that phenomenal. We look at some of Bryce Young here and what he's been able to do. His case for the Heisman, obviously C.J. Stroud at Ohio State is they're almost matching each other. I think C.J. Stroud probably pulled ahead a little bit with those 6 touchdowns in the first half against Michigan State. Michigan State being a top 10 team going into that game, although I would argue, in my opinion, I think Arkansas would beat Michigan State. But do you see it as a Stroud versus Bryce Young battle now for the Heisman?
Certainly seems they're building it that way, Gary, right now. And again, I'm with you. First of all, there's some still important games to go here. I think that really they were pretty equal if you want to look at Saturday. Again, Michigan State was a 9-1 team going into that game. I understand that Stroud had a great first half, through 5 touchdowns or whatever it was in that half. But at the same time, Bryce comes back against a team that's really a high-quality SEC team, has a big game. Again, it's just, Gary, it's the last few games here that we're going to have to kind of let this play out.
Yep, exactly. I agree, Rodney. All right, defensively, as I said, Will Anderson Jr., maybe he should be a Heisman candidate. Listen to this stat. Over the past 2 seasons, Anderson has a total of 124 quarterback pressures. The next closest player on that list is Oklahoma's Nick Bonito, has 88. Will Anderson is a true sophomore, number 31, but he has been a dominant player. Maybe this defense has had some up and downs, but Will Anderson, it seems, has had nothing but ups.
Yeah, Gary, you mentioned it. This guy has been consistent. You talk about all the inconsistencies, he's the one consistent for sure on this defensive side of the football, having a great year. And you talk about Heisman Trophy. There was some mention about Will Anderson, but I really think he's a guy that deserves more mention for the Heisman.
All right, let's talk about this game. The Crimson Tide, as we said, had mistakes. They fumbled the ball in the red zone. They allowed Arkansas to get a touchdown on a fake field goal. When is that going to stop? Fakes on the field goals and the punts. Will Reichard missed a field goal, and on every single one of Arkansas' scoring drives, the Razorbacks had at least 1 third down, meaning Alabama had the opportunity to get off the field with a stop, but they were not able to do so. In fact, they just weren't good on third down, period. Saturday was Alabama's third one-possession win this season. Of course, they lost a one-possession game against A&M, the other 2 being a 2-point win over Florida and a 6-point win over LSU 2 weeks ago. So Alabama is winning, and they're 10-1. That's the bottom line. They've already clinched the West, Rod, but Alabama fans are maybe a little spoiled. I don't mean that in a bad way. They're just used to winning, not only winning, but winning big, and some not happy with how close some of these games have been.
And I talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
Again, I just think that you have to learn that, this team, we talked about it before the season, all the transition that's happened with this team offensively. It's pretty phenomenal to me. They're averaging nearly 45 points a game. When you're talking about 4 new offensive coaches, you're talking about they lost a Heisman Trophy winner, they lost Mac Jones, they lost Najee Harris, they lost 2 first-round, Alex Leatherwood, certainly a first-round, and Landon Dickerson starting the NFL. He's equivalent to a first-rounder.
Early second-rounder, yeah.
So, you lose all of those players, and you're still having the production you're having.
Yeah.
And again, I understand some of the inconsistencies, but that's what happens when you have this much turnover.
Yeah, and Bryce Young has been incredible. All right, let's talk Alabama basketball. The Crimson Tide is going to be busy during the Thanksgiving break, taking part in the ESPN Events Invitational in Orlando. The Tide's first game is Thanksgiving Day against Iona at 4 p.m. It's a rematch of the first round of the last season's NCAA tournament. Alabama will play 3 games in 4 days, including a possible top 10 clash against number 4 Kansas. The Crimson Tide currently number 10 in the country and 5-0 on the season, or make that 4-0 on the season after beating South Alabama and Oakland last week. The Tide is looking good. Well, still to come on Tider Insider TV, we'll go in depth on Alabama's next opponent. One guess on who that is. The Auburn Tigers in the Iron Bowl. And we'll share our memories of Cecil Hurt, the legendary Tuscaloosa News sports columnist and editor, passed away earlier today. His influence on Alabama sports media and people in this state is significant, to say the least. We'll reminisce about Cecil Hurt coming up next right here on TITV. And we'll get to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. There's the phone number, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. You see the email address and how you can reach us on Twitter as well. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Alabama favored by 21 points over Auburn at Jordan-Hare. But if his history teaches us anything, it's that an Alabama trip to Jordan-Hare for the Iron Bowl, for the most part, isn't easy. Now, there have been a couple blowout wins by Alabama down there, but there have been some heartbreaking losses. Kickoff for the Tide and the Tigers is scheduled for shortly after 2:30 Saturday on CBS. Several weeks ago, this game looked like it might be a battle for Atlanta, following Auburn wins over Arkansas and Ole Miss. They were 6-2 overall, but then they've hit the skids, man. There's no other way about it. They've lost 3 straight games in the SEC. to A&M, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. They blew big leads against A&M, a 25-point lead, and against South Carolina, a 14-point lead. Bo Nix is out, TJ Finley is in, and their great kicker, Anders Carlson, is out as well. Now, they do have Tank Bigsby, who came up big against South Carolina. You see him right there, and I thought Finley played pretty well. But, Rodney, to put it any other way than this would not be truthful. I mean, Alabama's a better football team. It doesn't guarantee that they're going to win the game, but you're talking about 10-1 versus 6-5. There's a reason they're a 21-point favorite. If Alabama plays well and avoids mistakes, it should win the game.
It should, but look, we talked about Alabama winning those close games. Look, Auburn's dropped some really close games. They, like you said, they were up 28-3 on Mississippi State a couple of weeks ago. Mississippi State comes back. They've had a tough season. I mean, they lost their quarterback, Bo Nix. I think that certainly hurt them against South Carolina. That was a very close game. So, they're not that far off from having a much better record. They're a quality team. They've got really fast, aggressive players defensively. You're playing down there. It's a real challenge.
Bigsby went into the season as an All-American candidate, and he's had a good year. But it's been up and down. And Hunter, the freshman out of Neshoba Central there in Philadelphia, Mississippi, has split carries with him. Now, he had a great game against South Carolina, but he's never really gotten untracked the way I think Auburn fans expected him to this season. And you don't want to let him get untracked on Saturday.
Yeah, but at the same time, he still has 940 yards rushing. He has 10 touchdowns. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry. And I thought he ran with abandon, with speed, aggressiveness. He ran like a different back. I thought in this last game he really ran motivated. You mentioned Hunter. Hunter's a really good player. I mean, he's got over 500 yards rushing. Gary has a 94-yard touchdown run this year. He's averaging over 7 yards a pop. So these two guys, I think Alabama will see a heavy dose of them. You talked about TJ Finley, very strong arm, big kid, a guy that's capable as a passer, inconsistent, only completing barely over 50%, but he still has that threat that, he can hit you deep.
You mentioned their defense, and they make big plays, but they also give up big plays. We talk about Alabama. They give up big plays in the air. Sometimes they've had teams that have just lined up and run the ball down their throats. It's not been a typical Auburn defense, meaning that, Auburn's known for being physical and fast. They're that, but they give up a lot of plays too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're giving up 22 points a game, which isn't really that bad nowadays.
But when you consider their first two opponents, they didn't, I think, give up 3 total.
Right. Yeah. But, yeah, you're right, Gary. I mean, they have struggled on both sides of the ball at times and, defensively as well. But at times, you look at that defense, they're really aggressive, they're really fast, they can create negative plays, all of these things. So when you're playing down there, again, I go back to this, that team will be highly motivated and certainly be very emotional, and I think they'll feed off the crowd.
Yeah, you'll get their best shot. There's no doubt about it. I think the key is to make sure that if you're Alabama, Auburn gets your best shot. Well, now it's time for Coach Talk. The Iron Bowl, the annual rivalry between Alabama and Auburn, is on Saturday at Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn. Alabama has not won there since 2015. Coach Saban is 3-4 as the head coach at Alabama at Jordan-Hare Stadium, coaching the Crimson Tide. And he spoke to the media on Monday about this year's Iron Bowl.
As you well know, the Iron Bowl is one of the best rivalries in the country. There's a lot of people in this state and all over the nation that have great interest in this game. A lot of people have a lot of passion for their schools, which is what makes this rivalry what it is. And, it's always a difficult place to play on the road when you go down to Jordan-Hare Stadium. So this is something that our players are going to have to really have a lot of respect for and do a great job of preparing. Auburn really has a good team.
And some sad news now, very sad news to pass along. The Tuscaloosa News reported the passing of longtime T-News sports editor and columnist Cecil Hurt this afternoon. Cecil had worked at the T-News since 1982 and was recognized as one of the finest sports writers and columnists in the country and an expert on University of Alabama sports. Cecil was being treated for pneumonia and other ailments at UAB Medical Center. He was only 62 years old. And Rodney, I think it's safe to say, knowing both of you, that you were very close to Cecil. I think you were one of his closest friends. I know this hits us all hard, but as someone that knew him for, over 30 years. I mean, you've known him since
close to 40.
Yeah, close to 40 years. Obviously, we're sad, but what a great career he had. What a memorable person he will be forever. And he was a wordsmith. You know, we use that term, and there's a lot of people that write, but very few people could write the way that Cecil could, and very few people, when they did write, had as many people that wanted to read what they had to say.
You know, he was extraordinarily talented. I mean, obviously. But as a person, Gary, you know, my opportunities to be with Cecil, know Cecil, you know, he was an incredible person. And I think the one thing you can say about a person, if you can trust someone, you can't really say much greater about a person. And that's really the way it was with Cecil.
Yeah, you told Cecil something in confidence. It didn't go anywhere else, that's for sure. He is going to be missed by so many, those that knew him personally and those that just knew him through the words that he wrote. We'll be back after this. And we're back on TITV. We're going to head right to the phone lines. If you want to give us a call, 205-348-9882 is the number. Let's talk to our good pal John over in Bessemer. What's up, John?
Gary, what's going on, man? Roll Tide.
All right.
Hey, man, I'm trying to find out what are our chances against Auburn, and I know we got to play Georgia, Atlanta. Do y'all think we got a chance of beating Georgia? No, later on, man.
All right, John. Yeah, two good questions. Like I said earlier, I'm going to stick to what I said earlier. I think Alabama's a better football team than Auburn. So if Alabama plays well, they're going to win the game. But we've seen them go down there and not play well. We've seen them make mistakes. We've seen them have 2 pick sixes. We've seen a kick six. We've seen costly penalties. So we've seen Alabama not win when I felt like they had a better team. As far as Georgia is concerned, I think Georgia right now is a better football team than Alabama. But I think Alabama is good enough to win the game.
Well, the good news about that is Alabama hasn't played its best game.
That's right.
And, you know, you go to the SEC championship game, you get the best game out of Alabama. I think Alabama would have a great shot at that game, John. As far as the Auburn game, yeah, I feel really good about Alabama going down there. So I feel really confident about this one.
And by the way, latest playoff rankings, and I won my bet with Rudy Armand from 97.7 ESPN Radio in Huntsville. I bet him that Ohio State would jump Alabama in the CFP rankings, and they did. Georgia's 1, Ohio State is 2, Alabama 3, and Cincinnati moves into that 4th spot. Let's get to an email before we have to hit the break, Rod. Is there any chance for linebacker Christopher Allen to return before the end of the season? That's from Jamie in Haleyville. It's a good question. What do you know, Rod?
Well, I mean, it's possible, Gary. I have not heard that. I mean, when you look at the way Dallas Turner's now playing really well on that side, and also Drew Sanders is coming back, I guess Chris Allen would have to evaluate, is it worth the risk of coming back after having such a significant injury, if he can. Again, I have no idea if that's possible.
All right, more phone calls and emails right after this. And this Iron Bowl preview edition of TITV rolls on. Let's get back to the phone lines, Rod, and talk with our good friend CB right here in Tuscaloosa. Hey, CB.
Hey, buddy, how y'all doing? One quick thing about, Auburn invented home cooking. They clown talking about referee. But anyhow, I want to mention Cecil. I worked at Tuscaloosa News when I was a kid, and I'd seen him around a lot. I knew him, but I didn't really know him. I run into him at Swins one day, and we got to shooting the breeze. And, man, he was just down there to me. We talked baseball, football, basketball, the whole 9 yards, and I appreciated him talking because he didn't really know me.
Yeah, he can talk on just about any topic, CB. Yeah, he'll be missed, no doubt. All right, CB, thank you for your thoughts there on Cecil, and that's going to be echoed all over the state, Rodney, as we shared earlier. All right, let's get to another email, and this is from Dennis in Tuscaloosa. Bill O'Brien said he'd keep Sark's offense, but added his twist. Have you seen Sarkisian's influence? I haven't. Well, I don't think it's Sark's offense. I don't think it's Bill O'Brien's offense. Nick Saban says it's Alabama's offense. But I think a lot of times people confuse that, Rodney. I think that has a lot to do with terminology, keeping the terminology the same. But certainly when you bring in a new offensive coordinator, they're going to put their stamp on the Alabama offense. Yeah. You can't expect it to be the same offense from last year.
Right. It's not going to be exactly the same. First of all, you don't have the same personnel, so you have to play to what you have, the strengths and all of those things. But, yeah, I think it is the same in a lot of ways because, as you said, Gary, the Alabama offense, but at the same time, Nick Saban wants new ideas too. So certainly Bill O'Brien's added some of those.
And I'll say this, I don't know, other than the LSU game, and they won that game, let's be clear on that, but other than the LSU game, I just don't know how you could have any issues with this offense this year. I mean, it's been pretty prolific.
Well, like I said, you lose the players, and we went over those earlier. We've gone over them many times, and you're still averaging 45 points a game. Ohio State is just ahead of you, maybe close to 46. It's pretty amazing.
It is. All right, one more email, Rod, and this is about Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe is one of our most explosive athletes. Does a team need to find a bigger playmaker role for him? Somebody sent that in just a while ago. We don't have their name, but David in center sent that in. Should they find a role, try to find a role for Jalen Milroe? It's a little late in the season now, don't you think?
Well, here's the thing. We thought that there may be a package for him early in the year. I think that they've been trying to develop a package, but you know, again, will they use that later on? It's possible. It's certainly possible. And yeah, he is a great athlete, and I do think that they would like to do that, but they're not going to do it until they're confident in it.
All right, David, thanks you from emailing in there from center. All right, when we come back, it's prediction time. Alabama and Auburn in the Iron Bowl. We'll let you know what we think on a beautiful evening here in the City of Champions. We're back after this. It's Iron Bowl week. Alabama and Auburn, Saturday afternoon at Jordan-Hare. Rodney, Alabama's a 21-point favorite, but you know what they say. They don't play them on paper. They play them on grass. What do you think about Saturday?
I just hope it's not wet grass.
Yeah.
Auburn's done that a few times. But, listen, I think obviously Auburn's a very talented team. We talked about how maybe they're a little better than their record. But at the same time, I think that this Alabama team, with this offense, the way it's rolling now, it's going to be really, really difficult for Auburn to slow them down, 38-17.
Well, Rod, last week I think we had the identical pick, and this week we're not far off from each other. We don't share these in advance, but I said it earlier. And again, it doesn't mean that it'll hold the script, but if Alabama plays its best and Auburn plays its best, Alabama wins the game. The only chance for Auburn, I think, is for Alabama to play poorly, and I just don't see that happening. I think they're ready to play well. I got them 38-20. I think the Tide takes down the Tigers at Jordan-Hare. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Tider Insider TV, presented by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. A reminder, you can catch it again tonight live on WVOA 23 at 10:30 p.m. or anytime at WVOA23.com. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. We're going to leave you now a video from Alabama's football practice earlier this afternoon at the Thomas Drew Fields. Have a great evening, everybody. Roll Tide. And let's see if Bama can bring it home on Saturday at Jordan-Hare.
There you go, Byron. There you go. Good. I like that. Down to work. Switch it up.